Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Odink School of Mysteries. My name is Bear. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm glad you're here, and it's a beautiful kind of gray winter day over here at our house. I like the gray days, but they really just destroy my head. So I'm recording this through a blinding migraine. So I hope that um, I hope you're willing to stick with me and just bear with me as I fight through this thing, because today's a pretty spectacular day when it comes to migraines. It's pretty special. Um, Also, just before we get going, I really want to say a special thank you to my friend Luke, who donated some money. So thank you, Luke, very much. That really means a lot today. A lot means a lot today. It means a lot to me that you did that. That really was an incredible gift. Thank you so much for that. You're amazing. That helped us pay for some internet, so I could keep doing this. So thanks again. All right, so over the last week, I would say, I got several requests for people wanting to know how to begin. And that's a really good question. And that's a question that needs to be answered. And it's not a very easy question to give, because so there's a lot of reasons why people get into this. And I'm not, how do I put this? I guess you could say that because of my background and because of the way I kind of came up through the mysteries, the way I approach things are a little bit different than the way what most people do. Okay, so there's a lot of reasons why people want to get into this stuff, right? A lot of the times, the reason people want to get into this stuff is because they want to be in the know. They like the idea of secret knowledge. They like the idea that I get to know something that everyone else is blind to. And that's one reason people get into it. The other reason, which I think is kind of a derivative of the first, which I think is probably the more common cause for the reason people want to be in the know, and that's because people want power. They do. People want power. They like to. They want to be able to get a leg up on someone. They like to have the feeling that they are in possession of something that kind of gives them a leg up on someone else. And those are the most common reasons why people get into esoterica or the occult more broadly. So in the esoteric mystery school systems, a lot like as it was 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, when Jesus was kicking around and doing his thing, different people have different ideas on what enlightenment is, or what the highest goal of attainment is. So, like the Pythagoreans, for example, they believed that the highest form of attainment, that enlightenment, or some people call it, you might say, like, what is a pure heart? Like, what does having a pure heart mean? People like the Pythagoreans, they believed that it was like mathematical accomplishment, right? It's through mathematics and through some of these other higher forms of learning is how you gain enlightenment. To some groups, it's the communication with the logos, right? Tapping into the Tao or some other form like that. Other people, it's communication with the gods. Other people, it is the discovery of truth. And so I was at we had a one last big hurrah for my family a few weeks ago. Maybe not a few weeks ago. I think it was just about a week ago even. Where my wife's side of the family, they had the big Christmas party. I think we had it early January at some point. And my wife's cousin, Peter, was there. And he was excited to talk to me because he found out that I had some knowledge about esoterica and that kind of stuff. And he wanted to pick my brain about what I thought about some things. Because he was kind of he was getting into it too, and he wanted to know where to go. And I think I may have scared him off. I don't know. It's possible I scared him off. Because I'm not your average guy. I don't just believe in learning symbols for the sake of learning a symbol. There's a reasons behind it. And so I told him that you're not really going to get anywhere until you answer the question, what do you want? And that's partly, and that's because I come to it through the mystery school system. And particularly in the mystery school I came up through, that's one of the first things you hammer out before you do anything. You find out what the person wants, because that will largely determine which path they're going to take and whether or not you want to take them on as a student or not. And there's a few reasons for that. One, if you don't know where you're going, how would you ever know you're going to get there? Right? It's like the old, it's like the old archetype of aligning yourself to a star, or where if you, again, I'm sorry I'm a little slow today because I'm fighting through a fog here, but it's like if you don't know where you're going, if you don't understand the path you're on, you'll be blown around by the wind. You want to know what you want to know. And so if you are someone who is just looking for power, well, there's a lot of ways to get power. The true mystery schools, however, the ones who I believe are worthy of the name, are not particularly interested in what most people would consider power. Power is a subtlety. It's kind of like in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao, is it Tao Te Ching? I can't remember exactly how it's pronounced. I know the Tao says Tao, but I don't remember how the other ones are pronounced. But he spends a lot of his time explaining or going over how the wind is like the perfect metaphor for really what we're going for. And that is something that bends. True power is in something that bends. It's something that never needs to boast about itself, right? It has no ego. Real power has no ego, because why would it need to have ego? It's already in control. It doesn't have to prove itself to anybody. So, like, a good way of explaining this, and I've explained it this way before, is with the analogy of playing with Lego men. The little Lego men, and you like put them together, and then you enact these stories with them, and you have, like, let's say, like, one Lego guy who's really egotistical and thinks that he is the master of the universe, and he gets in a spaceship and tries to take over the other spaceships. I'm a boy and I liked playing with Legos when I was younger. And as the person who is quote unquote God in this scenario, am I going to be threatened by my Lego man's ego? No, why would I? I have nothing to prove to the Lego man. I'm the one who's in control. Matter of fact, I'm more than happy to let him keep thinking that he's the boss, because it doesn't matter to me. It's just a Lego guy. One of the, as a young man, one of the things I really wanted to do is discover what it was like to be a real man. And this was a big journey for me to discover that. And I never really I knew a lot of what I thought it was intellectually until I met an old farmer once who was a real man. And he had been, it's hard to explain because he was a really calm and loving guy who had these huge, powerful hands. He'd crush your hands, and he's trying to be gentle, and he'll just like crush your hands into a pulp. But he was not really trying to be gruff or aggressive. He's just, oh, hey, how you doing? Real soft-spoken. But he had like this power that came off of him. Like everyone knew who he was, and everyone was like, this guy is the real deal. This guy could destroy us if he wanted to, but he didn't. He was just self-assured, self-contained in his own power, and he understood that, and so he was just himself. He didn't care what other people thought. He didn't bother him who the president was. And that was like the first time I had like this ding, oh my gosh, there's something real here. And so the classic idea of power is the right to do violence. Right? That's essentially like if we break down all the social bullshit, right, and you kind of tease out all the nonsense, really when people say that I want power, what people are saying, I want the right to do violence if I have to. And so there's like the old saying that all authority ultimately ends in the right to do violence, which is why we say that the government has authority over us, because the government has rights that we don't, which is really weird, right? I can't go to my neighbor and tax my neighbor. I can't go to war on my neighbor, right? But the government can tax my neighbor. My government can go to war against my neighbor if it wants to. And that's because we've decided that the government has a right to do violence, and we don't, which is a really dumb idea. I don't think the government should be able to do anything that we're not allowed to do. But that's a different discussion for a different time. Anyway, so the point is, the classic reasons why people want to get into this stuff isn't really the reasons why most esoteric schools, the people who populate most of the esoteric schools worthy of the name, mainly the smaller ones who you've never heard of, they're not really into the same stuff that a lot of these other people are into. And so, I mean, like I was saying, I think I kind of frustrated my wife's cousin a little bit, because he says, so how do I begin? And I said, so what do you want? And that's a really hard question to answer. If you've ever wanted to sit down and really get to know yourself, that is a really tough one to wrestle with, the what do you want question. And, and I have this critique with Christians, and, well, really any religious, I'm not going to pick on Christians here, because I think most religious individuals fall prey to this idea. And that's like, I know God in here. Right? I know him. I know what he wants, and my critique is, you don't even know yourself. If you don't even know yourself, if you don't even know what you want, how could you ever hope to even pretend to understand what God wants? If there was a God, something that even a small God, even a God that is just slightly bigger than what we are, how would we ever even pretend to know who this person or this being is if we can't even figure out ourselves? And this is the problem, and this is why the mysteries are so. And I'm going to get into how to begin in a second, but this is just the preamble, I guess. And so, if you, which is why people don't understand what the mysteries actually are, and this is the point that I'm getting to. People don't understand what the symbols are actually trying to do, what this philosophy is trying to do. It's a scientific language that is explaining something very specific. And so, true mystery schools worthy of the name believe in one variation or the other the idea that all work is self-work. There's that very famous line that's inscribed on the wall of the oracle at Delphi, which says, "Know yourself and you'll know the universe and the gods." And that is, they think Pitha is the one who wrote that down. At least that's who the quote is attributed to. But that pretty much summarizes the entire philosophy of the mystery schools. Know yourself and you'll know the universe and the gods. And the universe is fractal in nature, right? We've talked about this before. The universe is fractal in nature. Patterns repeat themselves over and over again. You are built, the form and functions of the way that you are built are the same forms and functions of essentially the way everything else is built. And, people will argue with me like, oh no, a plant is totally different. It's like, they're really not that different. Right. There's some mechanical differences, but everything ultimately is built together. It's built, in this fractal nature. So if you want to understand something that's bigger than yourself, you have to look at yourself to understand really what's going on. And so what ultimately are all the symbols, all the philosophies, all the keys, what are all of these really trying to do? What are all these really trying to do? They're trying to get you to know something about yourself, so that way you have the ability to understand something that is beyond yourself. Because if you understand yourself, you can understand everything else. So really, ultimately what the mysteries are, what these schools are about, is they're actually, the mysteries are basically ancient forgive me here, give me just a second. It's basically ancient psychology, is what I'm trying to get at. It's basically ancient psychology. And the symbols encapsulate with 0 words, the psychology behind what is being trying to be measured. Right. The like the 4 elements, for example, and I haven't covered them in a while, but you have earth, which is the base. It's just the bottom line, the lowest in the vibratory spectrum, and then you have water that sits on top of it, which is liquid. So you have solid, you have liquid, and then you have air, which is gas, and then you have fire, which is transformation. Right, plasma, basically. Like I was a welder, and then there's some types of welding equipment that the amount of electricity is so hot, it's no longer even electricity anymore. It's a plasma. It's like it transcends heat basically, and it'll, if you get too close to it, it'll even like melt your mask. If you wear like a welding visor or helmet, it'll melt if you get too close to it, it'll actually melt your face mask. It's because the fire is the thing that breaks things down and transforms it into something new. Right? You're no longer what you were. There's been a profound chemical change in your being. You're no longer just a piece of paper. Now you're heat and carbon. Paper is gone. There is no more paper. Now you're heat and carbon. You're totally, all the base stuff is sloughed off, which is the carbon, and everything else that wasn't the carbon has been transformed into heat and has been set free into the universe, into a different form of energy. It's a very magical thing. But there's a lot of philosophy that's kind of based around that idea. And so you have, like us, we say that we're in the underworld. You're dead. You live in the underworld. The first arcanum of the mysteries is the very first thing that must be known before all other things can be known and understood in their contexts. Right? And so I feel like I'm getting off topic here. Talking for 22 minutes. So you're dead, you're in the underworld. Right. If you don't know that first part, you're not going to understand what those four elements are really trying to measure, are you? And so because they're measuring something very specific about a person, about the state of being, about where you are on the continuum that is Jacob's ladder, right? Are you down here at the bottom, or, with the dirt, or are you up a little bit higher, kind of above the ground, right? And so, it's, so if you're coming to this if you're a newbie, and you like the occult, and you know that there's something to the mysteries, that there's something that's dogging you about them. You want to begin, and you want to avoid the bullshit. This is my advice. Again, I'm sorry if this video is scattered. I'm not in my right mind today. It's a really bad migraine. My advice to someone who's just getting started is to recognize that all of this is about yourself. There's two major components. Well, I should say, the essence of the dying God myth is the thesis behind all the mysteries. If you don't understand the dying God myth, if you don't understand that the dying God myth is about you and your place in the story, then all the other stuff is going to be missed. You're not really going to fully understand it. And so if you're just beginning, my advice to you, save yourself a lot of time and meditate on the dying God myth and figure out what the dying God myth is, what it's about, and what is it saying about you and yourself. I'm part of a Norse mystery school. More specifically, I'm part of a mystery school who focuses its attention on the god Odin, the Norse god Odin, and we focus on his dying god myth. That's the one that I learned, and that's the one that I've dedicated my life to following, and that was when I was first started with the mystery school, that I was only given two things, and we've talked about this. If you haven't already, you're more than welcome to join the Discord server. I'll leave a link below if you're interested. But like what I've explained to a few people is, there's a number of folks who are way more well-read than I am. Like, they've read a lot of the more classic occult authors than I have. Like, there's one guy, he's read like all of them. He's read Manly Hall, he's read Levy, he's read, I don't know if he's read Hall or not, but there's people who are like that, right? They've read Manly Hall, they've read Eliphas Levy, they've read Madame Blavatsky, they've read Crowley, they've done the whole gamut. They've read all the people, and so they'll ask me questions about these authors, and I'm like, I don't know. Because it wasn't until very recently in my walk or my journey up this mountain that I've even started reading these guys, because the way I was taught when I first was given the opportunity to join the mysteries, the only thing I was given was the symbol of the world tree and the dying god myth. That was it. And I was told, study this for a long time. And that was it. That's all I got, I wasn't told to go read a bunch of occult books. I wasn't told to study anything specific, but that's all the instruction I got. I was given the symbol of the world tree, and I was told the story of Odin negating the runes. I was told to study on that for a long time, which is kind of what they do in yoga, so I'm told. Like, if you join like true yoga, like yoga as a mystery school, not just as an exercise, what the yogis will do is they'll teach you the moves, the downward dog and the lotus. I don't know. I don't do yoga. My friend Jason does. He kind of came out of that. Anyway, but that's what they'll say. They'll say, here are the stretches, do them for a long time, because you do them for as long as it takes. And it takes a long time. And eventually at first you're kind of going through the motions, but eventually something starts to happen. And then suddenly you're off. And it wasn't until after I'd kind of progressed through the first portion, then I was told, okay, now here's a bunch of myths. Then all I got was myth after that. There was no Levy to explain it. I didn't have anyone else. All I had was the myths. And then it wasn't, and so it's, and so here's the deal. And I guess this is the point that I'm trying to make. And I know I've been talking for almost half an hour, I think. You could know the profundity of the universe without knowing a single symbol. You can. Alan Watts was talking about a meeting he had once with a yogi or some guru, and the guru says, "You should come be my acolyte." And Alan Watts says, "Well, who was Buddha's teacher?" And the guru laughed because it was like, Buddha didn't really have a teacher, right? There was no, so far as we know, there was no formal, Buddha didn't go to a mystery school and get a formal teaching, right? It's possible to figure all of this out without any of this other nonsense. One of the things I only just learned recently, like only within the last few weeks, I was really surprised. I was listening to the audio version of the Book of Enoch, and there's a throwaway line in there somewhere, and I'll have to try and find it, and I'll try and find it if I can. But there's like a throwaway line in there that said something to the effect of one of the grave sins of the Watchers. And the Watchers are supposed to be like these fallen angels, right, who came to corrupt mankind. And one of the things that the Watchers did, that the Book of Enoch said, is that they said that the Watchers gave mankind a false mystery. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Is that in the mystery school system, in order to protect the true knowledge, there's a system of blinds that are put in place. Now, if you remember what a blind doesn't necessarily have to be a lie, though it can. But typically, it's where you put an over amount of emphasis on something benign or something wrong or something that's misplaced in order to get you to come to a wrong conclusion, to get you focused on the things that you shouldn't really be focusing on. And there's a really distinct danger in getting too involved with a lot of the symbols and that kind of stuff too early because of this very specific blind that's put in place, which is to get you focused on nonsense instead of focusing on what's really important. So, I don't think I'm doing a good job. I'm sorry. I really apologize. I don't think I'm doing a good job explaining what I'm trying to explain here. But that's why you love me, right? At least that's why I hope you love me. Oh my gosh. So, if it were me, and I was just starting, what I would have really have appreciated was someone who told me to not overthink the damn thing. Figure out what you want and study the dying god myths. Meditate on those things. Learn about yourself. Figure out who you are really. Don't flatter yourself. Don't try and come up with the best version of yourself as you can. Find out who you are really. The good, the bad, the ugly. And really come to terms with who you are. And the best place to start with that is the what do I want question. Because there's a lot of red herrings in there. And, someone will come to me and says, well, what I want is enlightenment. What I want is to have my third eye activated and yada, yada, yada. Why? Why do you want your third eye to be activated? What do you hope to get from that? Is the activation of your third eye really what you want? Or is that a means to get you to someplace else? What is the base principle? This is called mental alchemy. You're burning off all the fluff, right? And you're refining yourself down into a narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower piece of pure and pure and pure metal. And so if you do this long enough, you'll get to the point where you could come to a thesis. You could whittle this down and you finally realize what it is, or at least you get as close to it as you can. What it is that I want. What is really the motivating factor behind things. And the answers could sometimes be surprising. You know? Sometimes, like, you realize that you have, for one reason or the other, you have an abandonment issues with God. You may not know why, but the reasons you're doing everything is because you feel abandoned. You want to get back home. You don't like it here. Right? You love God. You don't like it here. You feel abandoned, and you are trying to get back to home. Right? That is a good thesis. Right? That thesis still needs work. Like, there's still things to chip away at it, but that is a good weeding away of all the other nonsense. And you get to a very narrow focus. What do I want? And the dying God myth. The dying God myth is the first arcanum. That's the first thing you need to learn. And the mysteries are for people who like to think. They like to think, and they want to be serious about it, and they really want to know the truth. You really have to want, and you have to want to know the truth, and you have to be in love with the truth. Madame Blavatsky, I mentioned her earlier, she was one of the first people to ever bring Eastern philosophy to the West. Really early on. And back in the 1800s. And one of the things she said, which is very potent, is she says that all true religions the only true religion is truth. The only true religion is truth. The love of truth. To getting to know the truth of things. Because the truth is hard to find. And if you don't even know the truth about yourself, what's really going on in here, if you don't know what's really going on in here, how can you ever possibly hope to understand what's going on out there? Does that make sense? That's my advice. Beware of false mysteries. It's really very simple. It's not, how do I put this? It's not difficult to do. Knowing the mysteries is not difficult. It's actually very easy. Going the way I go is actually very easy. But it's difficult in the sense that it takes a lot of self-responsibility and it takes a lot of time to put into it. You have to be strong. You have to be willing to recognize that there's things about you that are not so pretty. Right? We all have these dark thoughts, these dark things that we want to have happen. And you won't really know who you are until you're willing to look in every nook and cranny and really get to the bottom of all these things. Anyway. So that's all I got to say, I think. I hope that wasn't... I hope that was okay. I I'm apologize that I'm so scatterbrained and all of that, but that's really where my heart's at right now. Right? Because everything exists to aid in that pursuit. That's all the symbols are. That's what all the philosophy is. That's all the astrotheology is. All of that all comes back to that practice. It's the know yourself so you could know God. It's that slow climb back to the source. And climbing that ladder, climbing that mountain. And all the symbols are about all of that. All the philosophy is about all of that. That's what the Dying God myth is about. And without the Dying God myth, nothing else is understood. You can't understand yourself, and you definitely can't understand God. Okay? Clear as mud? All right. I love you all. Thanks again, Luke. That was really a wonderful gift, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.